Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today for our presentation about the guaranteed and viable curriculum. Just getting this loaded here. Here we go. Okay. So just to begin, we're going to start with a turn and talk to somebody at your table to describe a time or lesson where you felt students were very engaged in their own learning progression. So it might be a time you had students come up, like build their own rubric for success criteria, or where students like track their progress toward a really clear learning goal. So just go ahead and do that at your table. We probably have some people share out, but obviously there's no audience today. All right. So what is a guaranteed and viable curriculum? Well, the guaranteed part is that all students, regardless of who their teacher is, regardless of class placement or anything else, are all going to have access to the same standards-based, rigorous curriculum in each class. Too often, students, and especially students of color, are given material that is actually below grade level, and then they never get the chance to reach um, or have access to these standards-based rigorous targets, right? So this isn't optional. That's the guaranteed part. Whoever you are, whatever class you're in, whoever your teacher is, whether you switch schools or not, um, teachers have to teach these grade level learning standards, which instruct on essential skills and knowledge. And then the viable part is that the above curriculum has to be able to be taught and assessed within a given time frame. It needs to be reasonable. We need to pare down, I guess, what we are asking teachers to do to focus on these limited essential standards to where teachers have time to teach the curriculum and students have time to learn the curriculum. So some connections to our work that we've been doing here. This is what happens when I try to embed technology. No, this isn't. Oh, there we go. Um, So some connections to things that we've already been working on. So we've already been in the process of establishing district outs. So those essential standards that students all have to reach before moving to the next grade. That's not to say that they'll be like retained if they don't meet them. It's just that that's where our focus lies, is on preparing students to be able to meet those standards by the end of the year. Um, this year, we also had a move to a standards-based report card for trimester one. So teacher teams and grade level coordinators helped with that selection of picking sort of the most essential standards and the learning targets for those standards. We've already been using learning targets for a long time. And we do already have some work done on the use of rubrics and success criteria. But I think the direction we're moving is to have some more consistency at the district level to make sure that in each grade, students are having those same opportunities to have a real clear learning path, clear success criteria, and students can really be an active part of their learning. Um, so that's kind of where we are right now. So we're already planning using learning targets. We already are thinking about rubrics, but they're being used in different ways across the district. And we already are a standards focused school district. So what do we need to do next? We need to continue to narrow our standards. We already have district out selected for English language arts and math, K through 8 across the district. We need to do that same process for social studies and science and other content areas. And we need to do fewer things really well. Instead of just covering content, we need to focus on those key standards. We need to continue use of learning targets in student-friendly language. That's more of continuing the work we're already doing. Continue to protect teacher time for planning. That's a big part of that viable piece, is that we cannot have initiative fatigue. We need to focus, and a guaranteed viable curriculum needs to be our focus. So we'll continue to protect teacher time in PLCs as well as curriculum half day away twice a year to work on some of our next step. So the other thing we really need to do is to move away from task focus to standards focus. So we're still seeing at different places around the district, people assigning things that say like, we'll complete this worksheet, or rubrics that give points for neatness or for sort of following directions when that's not the standard that you're working on. So we still do need to make some moves in that direction. And we need to continue to detrack classes and remove homogeneous groupings of students when we still have that in our scheduling. Make sure everyone does have access to that curriculum. So kind of like, why should we use this framework, right? So like, why is this guaranteed and viable curriculum need to be our focus? So we are seeing a wide range in our planning. So some teams are very standards focused, and every student who is with the teachers on those teams would be getting access to this. But then, even at a different school at the same grade level, that may not be the case. So we really are seeing just a variety, and we need to be more consistent. We need to move away from task focused assignments like do the worksheet and do problems 1 through 36 and then turn it in. That typically leads to sort of compliance, and that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for learning. Um, Seeing a wide variety, like I said, of rubric types or criteria that's put onto a rubric. So we just as a district feel that we need to push for that consistency because we have pockets of best practice already, and we need to sort of build each other's capacity, spread our great thinking, because it's not guaranteed if only some teachers are using it, right? So it shouldn't matter who your teacher is, you should still have access to that same excellent, rigorous curriculum. So kind of why should we use this framework? If students know where they're going, they can be partners and take ownership of their learning. I really like the GPS analogy. If you know what your destination is, you know how long till you get there, sort of what are the stops or kind of path along the way, you can be an active participant in that process versus just sitting in the back seat and going, are we there yet, right? We want students to know where the end target is, and we want them to know when they get there. So I like that metaphor of sort of explaining we want students to take ownership and be partners in their learning. This clear success criteria provides a roadmap, right? Students can even evaluate work samples themselves. One of my favorite things to do as a writing teacher was to have a writing rubric and then put up pieces of work from last year's students or wherever and say, so what would you evaluate this on organization or on word choice, right? And have students sort of see what an exemplar looks like, but also kind of the steps along the way to reach that level. In evaluating a skill and knowledge with clear learning targets, kind of cuts that objectivity and moves away from inequitable practices like grading behavior. When we stay focused on the learning targets and the standards, there's less room in there for teachers to just put in there like, well, you did all your homework, so you get more points, when really that's not necessarily showing us how much or what the kid learned. So what are the things that are going to be required? So for each unit, you're going to include the learning targets as well as a rubric that you're going to create with a team with descriptors of what each score looks like. So there's an example here that you're welcome to play around with and look at. This is just an art example, but really it looks the same in other classes as well. So you'll notice like the learning target, the score, the descriptor, and then the definition. These definitions would be added by teacher teams. So we'll give you time to play around with that website, which is a great source of information. And we are going to be working for an internally coherent system, which Marzano and others advocate for, right? So we want to, across the district at different levels, be consistent in what our curriculum maps look like. The expectation for you is going to be that in your PLCs, you're going to design a scope and sequence, including your units for the trimester, the standards assigned to each unit, the learning targets based on standards, and rubrics with success criteria. That might sound like a lot, and I know that there's many of you who appreciate the chance to sort of bring in your creativity and that art of teaching. So that this is not to say that you need to be in lockstep using the same curriculum materials or on the exact same piece of a lesson the same day as a different teacher in your grade. You need the same learning targets. You need to be teaching those same essential standards, but the materials and methods you use to instruct should and can be tailored to your unique group, right? So if you have a class that really loves collaboration, or that's you got a bunch of kids really interested in a particular thing, feel free to bring that to the table. You've got the DPI state standards for your subject to sort of guide you. As you know, we have curricular resources that are sort of the foundation or base, but you are not required to just stick to that. So if you are a first grade reading teachers, yes, we have the Wonders program, but that doesn't mean that's all you can use. Please do bring in new material, always with an eye for equity and diverse perspectives, but that's something we really encourage. Make it your own, right? And then the UDL CAS guidelines are here as well for, that's always a great resource when you are creating kind of those more lesson plans. So our next steps are in PLCs to lay out your units for the year. So you're going to add standards to each unit. Check out our district outs first, right? So those are those limited essential standards that we started work on in teacher teams earlier this year. See if I can get that document to load here. Okay, so this might look familiar, but you would just go here if you're interested only in first trimester. But this curriculum work was done across schools, and so this is, you might recall, like how we selected what was going to go on trimester 1 report cards, and then you'll see here for each. This is all K, but like so math, these are the things by the end of the year that K needs to have accomplished. So take a look at that. And then you're going to break down those standards into learning targets with a learning progression that sort of builds to a final outcome. So looking at all of the skills and steps along the way, you're going to add a rubric for success criteria for each learning target. And, excuse me. Then as you move forward with your PLCs, you'll work on adding teaching materials and content, which you plan to use to teach each learning target and standards. A little bit more about learning targets. So we want our learning targets to be in student-friendly language. They should begin with I can. Just some examples here. I can tell the difference between a rectangle and a square. That's something a student could understand and articulate and sort of track their own progress toward that. Maybe that progress would start out with like, I can identify a square. I can identify a rectangle. And then you'd move to being able to tell the difference if you had both of them there on the page. So just some examples of what a learning target should be. And for our rubrics, what should it be? You do not want to use a rubric that is point-based. So it's not like 1 point for the heading is 1 point for the font size, 2 points for spelling, 3 points for content, because everything does need to be standards-based. If the standard is using proper, standardized English punctuation, then certainly you could include spelling, but it's not based on points. It would just say student, writes multiple sentences with no spelling or punctuation errors, something like that for proficient. We also want to move away from evaluating behavior. Things like neatness, timeliness, and effort don't belong on our rubrics. And we're going to focus on progress toward reaching a standard. Again, I have some examples of rubrics linked here that could be helpful. So I used that art example before. That is also here with other subjects as well. Finally, what you've all been waiting for is our template for curricular units. So this is borrowed a lot of the language and organization from, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this well, the Chetek-Weyerhaeuser School District. So I did borrow a lot of their kind of thinking for this, but this is our own version with some additions and changes. So you'll put in the unit name here, the learning targets based on standards here. There's a couple sort of guiding things over here of what we're looking for, like learning targets should be like a Bloom's taxonomy, verb plus content equals outcome. A little bit about the rubric, again, not task focused, not points and percentages. And then this is what you're going to be filling in with your teacher teams for your unit. We're going to start with one unit, bring that back to the group, get some feedback about the process. How did it go? Did you struggle anywhere in creating your rubrics? And hear from, so you'll be meeting in teams of like vertical organization by subject to get some feedback on your rubrics. So this is what that's going to look like. Each learning target gets its own rubric. So for that reason, we don't want to have 75 learning targets per unit, right? We want to focus on what's really essential and focus on those district outs. So again, part of like the why behind this shift, I just want to reiterate and reemphasize, like grading the way we've been doing it has often favored white middle class students. So things like grading effort, grading homework, or grading compliance type behaviors, more likely we'll just be measuring whether a student has the resources at home and the time at home to do something,